They might be self-aware.
Gary here. Hang on, the phone's stuck to my ear. Your voice actor for hire, calling from a payphone. Today on They Might Be Self-Aware, it's Claude versus Gemini in a secret corporate war inside Apple. And look, I get it. When you're shopping for who's going to replace human workers, you want a good deal. The guys unpack how Google undercut Anthropic by 90% to win Apple's Siri contract, even though Apple's own engineers prefer Claude. Turns out being better doesn't matter when you're 10 times more expensive, which is the exact pep talk I give myself every morning. Oh, and Hunter's losing his mind because Claude developed design taste, which, great. So now the robots have the one thing I thought made humans special. The ability to look at something and go, needs more blue. And honestly, I've been saying, needs more blue about my life for years, and nobody's calling that sophisticated aesthetic judgment. At least the AIs are fighting each other instead of just fighting me. Enjoy the show!
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.
If you actually go into Apple and see what all the employees are using and the systems that they are building on top of these generative models, you will not find a whole lot of Gemini, and that it's almost all Anthropic. However, Anthropic wanted a lot of money. So basically Google said, we'll do it for 1/10 the cost of Anthropic.
And that's why I continue to say that the winner of the AI wars will end up being Google/Alphabet, and why I think OpenAI is in tremendous long-term trouble.
They might be self-aware.
Vibing in the Valley of Electric Gods, right here on They Might Be Self-Aware. I am Hunter Powers, joined by the chief viber himself.
Don't like that name. Daniel Bishop.
I feel like vibe coding's becoming legitimately accepted now. Maybe we're in different circles and it's still kind of a bit of a slur in your side of the world.
Yeah, well, so what do you, and we've gone over this a bunch of times, but what do you define vibe coding as? Because there's still I use AI tools to make my job more efficient and I'm getting more stuff done, but I have expertise associated with this and I know and hopefully review, and we'll get to that in a minute, what is coming out versus me say thing at LLM and job get done. And to me, vibe coding is I have no deeper understanding of what is occurring, but I just said something and code came out. And kind of hard to argue with results until you were arguing with tech debt that gets accumulated over time, or security vulnerabilities, or so on. It's that's what I've sort of settled on. What do you?
Well, I think that's where it started, and that still exists within it. But more and more and more large corporations are saying, "Hey, we're going to make heavy use of these agentic coding workflows." Leveraging things like a Claude Code or like a Codex or like an Open Code. Is it Open Code? Is that the one? I think that's the open source version. And so the vibes that started at the outside, they're coming in, and it's becoming sort of synonymous with just coding best practices these days. Like if you're at an organization and there's no
best practices.
Yeah.
There's a huge push to use AI.
Well, yes,
but part of a bunch of different organizations.
But this is more than using AI. This is leveraging. I start with an English description of the code that I want.
Sure.
I then give that to an agent and potentially a whole team of agents and sub-agents who then return with code. And
and then maybe iterate on that. But if you're starting from nothing, or even starting with someone else's code, and you're I need to understand this and get kind of my head and your head around this, and then we can add to it. The term that I use for that, and I really like this one, is AI first. Where you say, look, I need to make a website from scratch. Bip, bip, bip. Great. Now there's already a website, and it was like 20 seconds. And it's just, you have the beginnings. It's all the boilerplate stuff.
Are you a vibe designer, Daniel Bishop, in your...
Well, I'm not a real designer, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, I suppose I'm a vibe designer. Hey, make this page look better. And it's like, what do you mean look better, man? I don't know. If it's worth looking at, it wasn't designed by me. I can tell everybody that with a straight face. Machine learning stuff, NLP, like, oh yeah, that's my jam. Anything beautiful to look at and like, oh, what a gorgeously designed website. That wasn't me. So,
but I'll wrap a bow on it. If you're at an organization and you're not using agentic coding tools, you're doing something wrong. If you're still writing all the code by hand, you're doing something wrong. And because of that,
code by hand still, but it's barely anything these days.
There is still a role for writing code, but if we only
I edit code, but I'm not like the first pass at it. Never me anymore.
I had a question for you. Anthropic's still your number one, right? Like they're your first child.
If I was paying for them over API, it wouldn't be. But I've got their big $200 a month plan, and I use the absolute snot out of that thing. I'm not one of their superpower users that made them force like token limits and whatever, but I feel like I'm getting my money's worth out of that.
Do you use models outside of Anthropic? Do you have like, I go to Anthropic for these things, but then when I need other stuff,
yes. So especially for like the deep research type stuff, I'm going to go to Gemini, for example. I think because, it's associated with Google and they've indexed everything forever. I think they do a very good job of like, okay, here's this space. I know a few examples in it. Can you help me like understand more of it? To give a very specific and slightly technical example, BERT, as in like the Sesame Street character, is a family of transformers-based models, like machine learning programs for those not necessarily in the know, that are good at things like classification and named entity recognition and this and that and the other thing. And while pretty much everybody has said, let's just go whole hog on like the big large language models, those aren't great at like some of these classification and named entity recognition tasks, and they're really not great at efficiently doing it. And so if you still have some of those old bog standard kind of tasks, while there's not a ton of research going into it these days, it's not none. And so I went to like Gemini and I said, I've used this before. I have this kind of task. Please tell me what the hell's going on in the industry in the past like 3, 4, 5 years. And it found one that I hadn't heard of. It's called Modern BERT. What do you know? And so like it was a modernization of the BERT architecture, longer context window, this, that, a whole bunch of other like improvements. And that was huge for me to like even, and I didn't necessarily even know what I didn't know. It would have been hard for me. I'm sure I could have found it, but like hard to find it. Fantastic tool for that.
Sorry, I'm thinking of two different directions, but I'll continue on direction number one. So you are not alone in this. That you go to Anthropic for some things, and you go to other companies for other things. That you like to date around a little bit in the AI world. You're not a monogamous.
Not an AI monogamous.
No, you
Sorry,
aren't.
Mom, who's listening to this. My dance card is full. What can I say?
Well, Apple. So Apple was in the news. I think we covered it. The story that Apple has partnered now with your love child Gemini to release the next version of Siri. The next version of Siri is going to be built on top of Gemini. However, if you actually go into Apple and see what all the employees are using and the systems that they are building on top of these generative models, you will not find a whole lot of Gemini, and that it's almost all Anthropic.
I've heard similar things from inside Microsoft as well. They might be pushing Copilot for everybody, but they use a lot of Claude internally.
That makes a little more sense. Having used Copilot.
Yeah.
Maybe it's gotten better. In fairness,
No.
No. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, a lot of people look at Copilot and they say, I'll use something else, unless they don't have anything else that they can use. But it does seem that when you're given the choice, Claude ends up being the choice. It's really good. We'll talk about 4.6, which just came out in a moment. But like it's 4.5, any of its other models. Like, it's been one of those frontierest of the frontier models. Very, very good at what it does. So why aren't they using it for Siri then, Hunter?
I think there could be multiple reasons, but the biggest reason appears to be money. Yep. So has been reported that Apple went through which makes sense. I'm sure they did. They went through a detailed, evaluation process to decide between, do they partner with OpenAI, the chat GPT models, because they already have a deep partnership with them. There is currently an integration built into the iPhone where you can say, hey, Siri, if you don't know the answer to something, I'll connect you with my chat GPT account and you can go off and use it. So that partnership has existed. And at the beginning of this, the assumption was that they would just go with OpenAI for this.
It just would be even more seamlessly integrated.
But OpenAI has been positioning themselves too much as a competitor for Apple. The belief is that they soured that relationship. So then you're left with Google and their Gemini models, or Anthropic and the Opus and Sonnet models, and I guess Haiku is another one. And so they did a bake-off, and they asked both of these companies, we would like you to train a version of your models that will run on Apple hardware, because Apple has really good hardware for doing AI inferencing. And also they have a lot of security and privacy concerns. So they're saying, like, look, if this was to happen, we would need to be able to run it internally. And they both went off and did this and came back. And they were leaning towards the Anthropic models per the internal reporting. However, Anthropic wanted a lot of money. And Anthropic's a much smaller company than Google. So we know these models cost a lot of money to run. And obviously, if you're the model that's running in all of iPhones, there's going to be a tremendous amount of usage. And there can be no sort of like loss leader idea here with a smaller company. And Anthropic's not a small company, but it's smaller than Apple, smaller than Google. So basically, Google said, we'll do it for 1/10 the cost of Anthropic. And our model's not bad. It's literally powering.
If it's actually 1/10, if this is what really happened, I think there's a lot of subsidizing going on there.
Yes, because Google can afford to subsidize it.
Exactly.
Anthropic can't.
And that's why I continue to say that the winner of the AI wars will end up being Google/Alphabet, and why I think OpenAI is in tremendous long-term trouble. But it's also the cost in general. If you look at, like, me, Daniel, or you, the listener, or Hunter, as the case may be, and you're just like, I want to use the best Anthropic model. Also, I want to use the best Google model. I will now pay per token. It's, however much per million tokens in and out, and they usually have different price. They do have different prices for tokens in versus tokens out. Google's way cheaper. Way cheaper. A lot cheaper. Also, people in general, both in terms of like leaderboards and the consensus-ish that I'm seeing online, which may or may not just be bots at this point, dead internet theory. But from what I've seen as well, like, I don't use the Google Gemini Pro 3 whatever model. Like, it's just not what I go to. I go to the Claude models because I feel like they do a better job of what I want with the way that I like to interact with these models. But it's really, 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 really expensive. And so if you're saying, rather than paying a $200 a month subscription, which most people probably can't or won't, that is a truly premium product. If you're like, I will pay, well, it's only like $1 per million tokens and I'm not going to use it that much. Okay, then Google is the better option because it's so much cheaper and it's, for most use cases, most of the time, pretty much as good.
Yeah, I'm looking at what used to be called the LLM Arena. Now it's just called Arena.ai, where they have the leaderboards. And just as an example, so Anthropic has the number one position right now with Opus 4.6. That has a score of 1,502. And then right below that is Google's Gemini, which has a score of 1,486. So
that sounds really close.
Right. We're talking fractions of a percent of difference, but maybe 1/10 of the cost for a company like Apple. However, the question still remains, because for their internal work, Daniel,
right? Apple's using.
They're right. They'll foot the bill there. Look. We'll pay the 10x premium for all of our employees. We just can't foot that bill for all of our customers.
Fair, sure.
But
they literally see the value to their developers if this will make people better.
I think it's more than that. I think it's more than that. I don't think that they are paying that money for the whatever the half of 1/10 of 1% better. It is I think these models are different. I mean in a way that they feel different, and when you're using them, they are different. They're different personalities.
Agreed.
For me personally, I am now like anything that is human interfacing, I go to Claude. I treat Claude like my product manager, my marketer, my copywriter, my editor.
Well, no, Gary's the one that you go to, not Claude.
Oh, you're not referring to Gary who does the intros. You're referring to the other Gary who lives in my server rack
shoved into
and is on a Claude bot.
Poor guy.
We can get into that Gary. There's been issues there, but the point being, I let Anthropic handle anything that's human facing, and then for me personally, anything that's code facing, I go to OpenAI. I'm using Codex 5.3, which by the way is not on. We could argue whether this is strategic, and it probably is. You can't find benchmarks for it because OpenAI will not allow API access to it. The only way to access the latest coding model from them, which I personally think is pretty incredible, is through the CLI tooling.
So this is their Claude Code equivalent.
It is their Claude Code equivalent.
Okay. But I've heard great things also about this new 5.3 model. Tell me, when did that come out?
Well, do you remember when Opus 4.6 came out?
It feels like it was just yesterday. Okay. It wasn't just yesterday, but boy, it was extremely recent.
I want you to remember that moment and go back to that moment, and you're there and you're present. You probably got a big smile on your face. You're doing a little dance, a happy
Christmas
dance.
Came early. Look,
and then
it went up by 0.1.
Fast forward 20 minutes later.
Yeah.
And then the OpenAI dropped the bomb.
OpenAI doesn't do their own announcements anymore. They do announcements in a reactionary measure when someone else drops a new model. It's silly. Like, how can you be the leader in AI if all of your announcements are right after somebody else made an announcement? Come on, guys. It's childish. It's a good model, but come on.
It's a really good model.
Come on. So Opus 4.6, one of the new things that they've got for that is agent teams. Speaking of cost. For those who aren't terribly familiar with like how agents work, imagine you have one thread where you're talking to a large language model, and then it says like, oh, I need to use this tool. I need to go look up this information. I have this small task that I could just go do on my own. And it pops off an agent, which is just another instantiation of the LLM. And it might be under like a different or cheaper model as well. And then it goes and does task and then spits back like, hey, bigger or at least main thread, this is what I came up with. Oh, okay, cool. And then you keep going from there. However, this agent teams where it says like, oh, we'll break up complex tasks into parallel subtasks and coordinating agents, which I've seen it work, and it is bonkers. I've gotten to the point where instead of here's this one thing, please accomplish it, I'll review it at the end, I've given literally 9 wildly separate things into one thread, which I never would have done before, and just watched it be like, here's a bunch of little checkboxes.
Like bing, 9 bing, feature requests, basically. Is that what you're describing? Okay.
Like a bunch of stuff all at once instead of one thing.
Okay.
A year ago, never would have tried this. But now it can do that. And each of those agents is also soaking up sort of cost. And so per minute, you can spend a lot more money if you're not on one of these all-you-can-eat type plans.
Yeah, it's very expensive. It just is.
Yeah. But also, it's really good. It's really good. I like it.
There's also a thread out there, which I think I agree with, that even though it is very expensive, however, it's still being heavily subsidized, and that in the future, like we are all, if you want to use these models, it's going to be a couple $1,000s a month to use them. It just is. It's not today. It's $200 a month. you think the price is going to go down, but the reality is we're being heavily subsidized now. And if you want to be leveraging whatever, the ChatGPT Pro plan, the Anthropic Pro plan, the Gemini Ultra plan, I think that's what they call it, it's going to be closer to like $2,500 a month. And again, the average person doesn't need that tier, but if it's your job...
The average person can't buy a new iPhone every month.
Correct.
You know?
But if it's your job, you're making six figures plus heavily leveraging this tooling, and also an assumption that your employer is going to start augmenting, and helping you with these packages even more.
So the subsidy just comes from elsewhere because the companies will have to see this is the future. We are obviously seeing that let's call it at least 2x value, where they're like, I'm paying this engineer $70,000 a year. I will also pay an extra $25,000 a year just to get them access to Claude 6 or whatever. I do agree that there's like a subsidy aspect of things that's going on here. We keep seeing, and like this happened with Opus 4.5, where people were like, this is amazing. It's the best thing ever. And then a few weeks before 4.6 came out, a lot of threads started popping up of like, did this start getting worse? I'm noticing it getting worse. I personally didn't, but a lot of other people online did. And I think this is the company saying, we're going to start spinning down some of the old compute and spin up the new stuff for the new thing that's about to come out. And that's where the rumor mill started. And they were right. But part of that isn't just less computers. They're taking the existing model and quantizing it, basically taking a bunch of it and just, well, you're going to have 80% as much space to run as you used to. And you can get most of the benefit easily enough through that.
So let's stay on the 4.6 a little more. So you mentioned that you feel like now you can give it more tasks to do at the same time, that it doesn't lose its context. Although Opus famously has a much smaller context window than its competitors. The amount of information that you can give it as it's doing its work is demonstrably less than its competitors.
Well, but, had been 4.6 has a million token window, which
it's up to a million,
which is right up there with the biggest.
Okay,
right, and depending on who you talk to, that million token limit, and tokens, for those who may not necessarily remember, think of it as like about a third of a word, kind of on average, because words get split up into sub-word tokens, and so like AI is going to be one token, but the word repeatedly, probably 3-ish tokens, somewhere in there. Yeah, a million tokens is a lot, but also every request back and forth is the entirety of the conversation that you'd had that didn't get like compacted. And that's a thing that they're doing more of these days. And so if you have a long conversation and you're paying over API, you're paying by the token, it's kind of this exponential growth in a conversation. So you want to keep things short and then just like clear it out and start back over.
You were throwing some shade on the vibe coders at the beginning, but send your hate mail to Daniel Bishop. You can leave it in the comments if you're a vibe
they
coder.
Might be self-aware.
Hunter loves you, and Daniel, But
I also love you. I'm glad that people are getting things done.
One of the maybe legitimate criticisms of the vibe coders would be security, because there's been several high-profile incidents where someone...
I wouldn't say maybe. I'd go a little stronger than maybe. If you say, hey, Claude, make me a website, and they'll be like, I'm on it, boss. Boom, makes website. And you don't go through like security hardening type passes, because it's read all the code out there. It knows about these kinds of best practices. But there's a huge difference between minimum viable, I can put a thing on the internet and have people use it, versus enterprise, production ready, SOC 2 compliance, hardened databases automatically, what do you call it, where you'd have like your API tokens like change weekly, rotated.
Refresh tokens.
Yeah, refreshed and rotated keys and stuff. Like all that kind of stuff, you usually need like a team of people who already know to do these sorts of things. And you can still have a website and not have any of the stuff that makes it, secure at all.
But 4.6, at least in theory, improves upon this. Its understanding of security and its ability to create secure software. And they did sort of a demonstration of this with the launch.
Right. It's the opposite. It's not create something secure. It's find insecure stuff.
Sure, but you need to be able to identify the insecure stuff in order to create secure stuff.
Yes.
And so they leveraged the model to go out and find, I think it was like over 500 vulnerabilities in open source software. So the code was out there.
Right.
And submitted their PRs to fix it.
And we're not talking just like some Joe Schmo's, ninth grade intro to programming class, whatever programs. This is like open source software used by people. This is stuff that's like in ecosystems.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
This is software used by the largest companies in the world. I think something that most people, if you're not in this industry, would be very surprised to learn is that when we build software, we often start by pulling in well over 100 other pieces of software, often open source software, because you pull in one and then it has 5 dependencies and then it has 5 dependencies. There's this giant dependency tree of...
Right. You have your core libraries, which are like, this is your, think of like a library. You have a shelf of books in your house and you can use any of the knowledge in it. But maybe you need something that's specific for like making really pretty graphs. There's a book for that. There's a whole other tool, another program, a library, whatever you want to call it. But like you can go get that and it's easy to find online. But that book relies on 30 other books, 6 of which maybe you already had, but you need those other ones. And each of those has a bunch of ones that it depends on. And right, in the JavaScript world, and what is it, via Node, I think that it's a bit of a joke in the programming industry of like, okay, you're reliant on this gigantic chain of stuff where anyone might have some man-in-the-middle attack and like compromise something. It goes all the way down to a long time ago, somebody made an is-even function of like, this number, is it even or not? And just like everything relies on that. Which is goofy to me, but
there's another related to this, another movement that I'm seeing that I think will take over, which is more and more companies are getting rid of these dependencies because they can leverage the agentic programming tools to, number one, isolate the functionality from the dependency. So there's some library that they brought in. Let's just imagine you need your program to read Microsoft Office documents. And so, great, there's a wonderful open source library that's been around for 10 years and it can read anything coming out of Office.
Right.
So you bring it in.
Thanklessly maintained by like one dude in Minnesota.
And it's this huge thing. And by the way, it has a whole bunch of dependencies as well. But the reality is you only need to read Microsoft Word documents. You don't import Excel files or PowerPoint. So the first thing that AI can be leveraged to do is identify only the part of the code that's related to Microsoft Word and just bring that in. And there's some automation that's already exists around this thing called like tree shaking, where you just bring in the responsibilities you want. You basically shake away all the extra code.
Sure.
But then there's a next step, which is you tell the AI, just like you give it the 9 things to do, say, you know what? You have an example here. I would like you to re-implement it, implement it better, implement it in a way that's just pure natively integrated with our system and get rid of the dependency.
Rely on that external
Correct.
thing anymore. Right.
And it probably is more performant and it potentially allows for the agentic developer to have more context and definitely gives it more control as it continues to try to understand the whole system and reason about it, because it all exists in one place. It doesn't have to go off into...
Right.
So I think that this is a trend that will continue, which is shaking of the dependencies. And I think that these new models are very, very capable of doing that. And there's been some interesting examples of that.
The thing that I'm worried about is people using, and this is not new, like it's already definitely happening, is people using models like Claude Opus or any of the other ones out there to find vulnerabilities and then not disclose them and help the community.
Are you talking about hackers?
Hacking.
Hack the planet!
Yeah.
They're trashing our rights! They're trashing our rights!
Bad actors are going to become ever more capable. And like, it's an arms race, right? We have antivirus software that helps stop most of the big main type things in there. A lot of this comes down to don't click weird attachments that are sent from you. Like, check the sender, make sure.
Daniel, you wouldn't download a car, would you?
I would download a car. We've been over this. I would absolutely download a car.
You heard it here, folks.
But when it comes to like cybersecurity, it's less about going to a normal website and just like, well, my computer now has a laughing skull and it just like deletes everything. Frankly, these days, it's mostly either espionage or ransomware. And if you get
4.6
someone to open
this.
up that mysterious link in their email, then you have a problem. But maybe there's going to be other zero-day exploits that are found where you can just get around that entirely. You just go to some website and an ad serves it to you.
4.6 will solve this, Daniel. Don't worry. There was one more 4.6 model that came out. I think it was 1 day or 2 days after the official 4.6 release. This one was a little bit speedier, known as 4.6 fast. So conceptually, at least, it runs at twice the speed of 4.6, which 4.6 is relatively fast already. But then they came out with this version of it, 4.6 fast, the same quality, twice the speed, and only 6 times the cost. Did you see this?
I hadn't seen that. No.
Yes.
So I'm immediately wondering what the hardware is that this is on. And I'm curious if it's the friends over at Grok, not Grok owned by XAI, Grok with a Q, where they have like, everyone thinks of like a microchip as like a little square. This is like the CPU that you install into your computer. Theirs are big chips. Order of magnitude or so bigger, like plate sized. Huge chips, and supposedly they're lightning fast when it comes to inference, like wildly crazy fast, but they're not known for being cheap. And so you mentioned a 4.6 fast. That's a lot more expensive. That's immediately where my mind goes.
Yeah. I think this is another lever that we're going to increasingly see people pull on that. So we're already paying for access and we're paying for tokens, but also paying for speed. Great. You want the quality? Do you want it cheap? What is it? Cheap, fast. What's the third thing?
Good.
Yeah. Pick 2. And you want the third, then that's the $2,000 a month plan that comes out. Oh, you want it to be fast? You don't want it to wait around? Again, for me, on average, it takes 20 minutes. When I ask the AI to do something before I get the response back, I'm waiting on average 20 minutes. By the way, your 9-task Claude job, give me a ballpark. How long is that taking?
Oh, that took like 45 minutes.
Okay.
Because each one of those tasks was learn a bunch of things, compact the window, read the 5 most relevant files now that it has a plan, start executing, do tests, because I'm like, you've got to run tests, and so you got to add in, because I'm not just telling like make a feature, it's make a well-documented feature, make sure that we're adding to our README file, make sure that we're adding to a documentation set, make sure that you have tests that aren't just like, oh, test that passed. No, it has to be like a real test. And each of those things adds time. And so, yeah, it took like 45 minutes to an hour to go through all of that, which sounds like a long time. And compared to like, I made a thing in 20 seconds, like, yes, it is a long time. But the amount of time it would have taken me to do all of that, I don't know, a couple months. So like, yeah, I'll take the 45 minutes.
So I've used Opus 4.6. And although I have used it some for coding, but only a little bit, again, primarily for more human endeavors. And
that's really interesting because like for the first time ever, I used an AI model without checking the code for a real, please my work, don't fire me, a real like costs money to do thing. Because there's a human in the loop system that I leveraged to be like, I need to have this data double checked. And I had Claude take an existing tool and make edits to like, instead do it for one thing, do it for 10 things. It was not an entirely from whole cloth new thing. It was adapting something, but it ran a couple of tests and it said, I did this and this. And I read over its output, but I didn't check the code. And I said, looks good to me, and hit enter and spent actual real money on like a process that happened. Never, ever, ever would I have done this previously. We're at the point where I trusted it enough to say this, like first pass, yes, I think that this is going to work, to the point where in previous times I would do a test with like one task being sent through to the humans and get the review and like, okay, did it go out right? Did it come back right? Cool. Now we'll do like 10. Okay, it didn't break. Now do the full thing. I went straight to the full thing, 0 problems. And I didn't feel 100% confident. I felt very confident. And I even had the thought, like, should I just do the, to hell with it, boop. And yeah, it just worked. So maybe Claude, OpenAI's, what is it, Codex 5.3? Maybe that one does a slightly better job with coding. But in terms of all of the back and forth that I need, it's hard for me to move away from Claude Opus at this point.
Yeah, Opus is not a bad model for coding. It's right up there on the top. In fact, when I'm looking again at the LLM arena, it's number 1 in code right now. And again, we can't see OpenAI's because they're hiding it.
But that ELO can't be that much higher.
No, right.
Partially because of how ELO works, but
so it's not a bad thing. 5.3 is faster. By the way, faster than 5.2. Claude is still faster than Codex. Pretty much universally agreed. And
faster can matter.
Oh yeah, I am really looking forward to having really fast models. I've played with the Grok has a fast Grok, the one with the K, the Elon Musk has a fast model, which I played with for a while, where your code kind of just appears instantly, and I do think it fundamentally changes how you work and how you think. And when you gave it that 45-minute task, if half of a second, 500 milliseconds later, it appeared.
It just said, did all of it.
Done. It forces you, because you have 45 minutes to then think and do other things, and it changes it. It really does change the story. So we'll get there. We're not there yet.
We're the limiting factor, because in that 45 minutes, it stopped 5 whatever times and asked me, hey, we're at a decision point. This could go either way. What do you think of like thing? And I said, yes, do this one instead. Or, oh, I understand what you're doing. Can you change A and B to be more like G? And so I still think that at the speed of code is way faster than people, but we still do need to be involved. I don't want something that makes 9 features in 500 milliseconds, because I feel like that is an inappropriate amount of involvement from the person. If you're making something that a person has a desire to will into existence and is presumably part of some other corporate chain of like interests and product managers and whatever, there still needs to be that back and forth in that iterative process. And yes, that's slower and more inefficient to have people involved over and over, but like that's how you build software, right? You don't just say, I built the software, it is done, that is the version that is being shipped. There's reviews and edits and changes, and no, this other team needs to make a couple of API differences, and oh, we've got to add that new column to the database, which the AI could still do. But like that's I don't know. I don't think that we're involving humans enough if you just say, please do the entirety of everything for me.
There's something that I felt using Codex 5.3 high, because there's different codexes 5.3. And that was and I wish I had a benchmark for this, but a demonstrable increase in taste. And by that I mean like the aesthetic of what it was doing. A specific example was I had it revisit a design that it had implemented previously and critique it, and then come out with a new version of it, which was like just mind-bogglingly better. And by the way, the last one was built with 5.2, and I went through the similar process of refine. Okay, it couldn't make it any better, and it wasn't very good. It looked very it
signed off on itself and said, "This is about as good as I can do."
Yeah, but it looked very like this was just AI generated. This looks very templatey. That you just sort of downloaded some template and you customized your template. It didn't look like a real designer did it. Okay, and again, I felt this in the code, but I saw it in the design. That taste, and you mentioned earlier, that you're a bit of a vibe designer, and I wonder that you're relying on Opus's taste.
But I look at the designs that it comes out with.
You still have an emotional reaction when you see it.
Right.
Are you feeling something similar from Opus, where it's there's this intangible, and this is what I'm getting at with like different companies and using different models. There's this intangible quality that I don't know whether it's self-awareness or not, but
I was going to make the joke. Okay. Yeah. Right. Are they becoming self-aware?
We're getting closer though, right?
They're much more self-aware than they used to be. Because like I described, and the way that I do any sort of like big batch of something at the large language models these days is I've really adopted this interview process where I say, here's my idea, here's everything. I just word vomit, stream of consciousness, whatever. And then I'm done. And I say, don't start making stuff yet. Ask me a bunch of questions until you because this is like the product manager to the engineer level of like, you could take what I asked and make something that meets everything that I asked for, but is not necessarily what I wanted. And so I'm like, you ask me a bunch of clarifying questions and dig for the truth. Partway through implementation, if you ever come into like, maybe this could go two ways, ask me. And that interview style, that back and forth, tremendously useful in terms of like getting to where I actually wanted. That set of 9 features that I had to implement from the get-go, the first like, and this, it was at the beginning of a new project. And I said, make all of this stuff. And it was like, make a website and a database and the back end and the front end and these buttons. And it has to do these like 6 different things. And okay, we have to think of it from this angle and this angle. We need 2 totally separate views for that. Absolutely couldn't have done that in like one pass before. And then it asked me a ton of clarifying questions. And then as it got through that, I ended up with like, it's not enterprise ready. It's not complete. I had a bunch of like follow-ups and stuff after seeing that progress. But holy moly, it got a bunch of stuff done.
Yeah. So I use almost the exact same process where I start by just word vomiting. I'm using something called Super Whisper. There's all sorts of things that are, right, just, so I mean literally talking. I just, well, I was thinking about this feature. I thought this would be cool. And I was also thinking about this idea and that idea and this idea and that idea.
That voice.
Yeah, absolutely. And some other, I throw the accent. Hello there, Claude. This is Hunter from They Might Be Self-Aware. And then I have it do the interview. And then it comes up with its plan. And some of these plans are long, 20 pages of plans. Yeah. And I then read the plan. And if there's something, if I have explicit feedback, I'll give it. But here's the one more thing I do. Another step. You can try this at home. And you too, Daniel. At the end of it, I say, okay, I think we're in alignment. But before we move on, I want you to stress test this plan by asking me some very specific questions. Like quiz me on it, this or that, to validate that this is the correct direction. And then when you feel comfortable that we are completely aligned, at that point, you can move forward. And so then Claude has the like really cool tool where it's basically multiple choice questions that it pops up.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And it's really quick. And they're pointed questions that make you think, wait a second, there's kind of 2 ways. If you were doing this, how would you prioritize these things? And how would you do that? And
I actively feel good if it gives me those little multiple choice.
Yeah.
But it's like, here's 4 questions.
Ask
Each
it to stress 2, 3, test 4. The plan.
Yeah.
So that's my one little insight. And I think you will get even better. And maybe it's even a little bit of enjoyable. Now, Daniel,
I love it.
If our listeners want more, they want more. They acknowledge that they might be self-aware and they're trying to find out when it's all going to happen. How do they find out when it's going to all happen? But by the way, it's on a Tuesday in 2036. We might talk about that next episode, but forget about that. Forget about that Tuesday in 2036.
In the meantime, there's YouTube, there's Spotify, there's Apple Podcasts, there's other places where you might get podcasts to view us and or listen to us. I guess if you're watching us, you're probably listening. You don't have to. You could go to YouTube and then mute us and watch us, and then also listen on like Spotify at the same time. Try and sync up the audio. It'll be great. Or just go, to one of those places. Subscribe, throw us some likes and some comments. We love them. We read them. We get fan mail sometimes. We love that. We read it. That's what I'd say, Hunter, is go to those places and get more of us, because we might be self-aware. You might be self-aware. They might be self-aware.
You heard it here first, folks, and we will be back very, very soon with even more.
They might be self-aware.